Welcome, everyone. This is actually part one of a two-part series that we're going to be doing on inflated voter rolls. And in this first part, Dr. Frank is going to walk us through what does that even mean? How do you recognize it? And why does it matter? And I'll tell you it matters a lot, and he'll get into that. And then on October 27th, so that's 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to have Dr. Frank come back on for part two, the exciting conclusion, where he's going to present to us his binder strategy, which I can tell you the team and I got a sneak peek of, and this is some pretty cool stuff. So if you're wondering, as you're listening tonight, if you're wondering, okay, that's great, but what do we do with this? Like, what do we actually do about it? Come back for part two, right? Now, I know that we always have some new folks that are joining us for the first time. And of course, I want to say welcome to Cause of America. And I also want to tell you a little bit about our speaker tonight, Dr. Frank. Okay, so I'm going to read Dr. Frank's bio. Dr. Frank is a world-renowned physicist with 60 peer-reviewed scientific publications in the world's leading scientific journals. His PhD is in surface electroanalytical chemistry, which combines chemistry, physics, electronics, and advanced computing and mathematics for the manipulation and investigation of molecules on surfaces. Since December of 2020, Dr. Frank has been working incessantly for election reform with grassroots teams in over 40 states, earning the title of the Johnny Appleseed of election integrity. He's met in person with dozens of secretaries of state, attorneys general, legislators, and hundreds of local election officials. He has testified formally in several legal and legislative proceedings. And Dr. Frank was featured in two of Mike Lindell's 2021 documentaries, Scientific Proof and Absolute Interference, because he discovered several of the algorithms being employed to manipulate our elections. Now, you may have been able to see Dr. Frank visiting your state or somewhere near you. I will tell you just real briefly, he's going to be in southern Colorado this week, right? This
Yeah,
week,
I fly
not
out
next
tomorrow
week.
morning.
Yes. So, and we did, if you're in Colorado, you should have gotten an email from Cause of America where we listed like where he's going to be when. But if you missed that, you're in Colorado in that, look, he's got the map up too. Mesa, Delta, Saguache, Rio Grande, and Conejos. So if you're anywhere near, unfortunately, those are all like 4 hours from me. But if you're closer to any of those areas, like northern New Mexico, and you want to come up to that and check out those, then Michelle's dropping an email in there where you can get more information. All right, so without further ado, let us welcome Dr. Frank. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Amy. I'm glad to be with you guys again. You're talking about me visiting Colorado. I'm looking forward to it, and people are like, "Well, why are you going to those tiny, small, red, insignificant counties, Dr. Frank?" It's like, don't you want to go where all the big voter fraud is? And no, I don't want to do that. That's sort of like saying we're in World War II and we're going to attack Berlin on the first day. No, we don't do that. We got to get to Normandy first, and we choose our battles carefully. We pick places where we can build beachheads. That's why I'm going there. So the first thing that's going to happen, since this is the beginning of the talk, the first thing that's going to happen when I walk into these small counties, it happens to me all the time, is they say, "What are you doing here, Dr. Frank? We don't need you here. Our elections are fine." And I look at them like, "Why do you think that?" And they say, "Well, we think they're fine because we have a good clerk, we have good county leaders, we love our sheriff, we're a small conservative county, everything's good here, Dr. Frank." And all that does is show me that they don't know what's wrong with their elections. And so I'll sit down with their sheriff, I'll show them their own data, and their jaws fall open, and they're like, "Wait a minute, that couldn't be right." And they'll call the clerk, and the clerk will say, "That can't be right." And I show them their own data. So my motto is follow the data with Dr. Frank. Follow the data with Dr. Frank. All you got to do is show people their own data. You don't even have to make an argument. As soon as they see their own data, they're like, "What? That's not okay, Dr. Frank. What do we do about it?" So I said, "Well, this is going to happen until you take back local control of your elections." And they said, "Well, how do we do that?" So Amy introduced me nicely. She said, "Tonight I'm going to talk about the voter rolls. And then 2 weeks from now, I think you said, Amy, is that right? 2 weeks?
That's exactly right. Yeah. The
In 2 weeks, I'm going to come back
27.
with the binder strategy. Because when you're fighting a war, you don't fight it one person at a time. You fight with a strategy. And in that strategy, we build coalitions of counties. That's what we've been doing. I'm doing this state by state now. Got lots of states that are just coming awake right now. It's been a real challenge for me. I'll talk about that tonight. You know, when I come into a state and I meet with all these counties, they're all like, "We're ready to go. What do we do, Dr. Frank?" And I say, "Well, the first thing we got to do is get you the data." And they say, "Well, how do we get the data?" And I'm like, "Well, let's get the data." It's just explaining to Michelle how hard it is sometimes to get the voter rolls. For example, I'm going to Colorado tomorrow. It took me almost 3 weeks to finally get the voter rolls, the right voter rolls. People aren't used to looking at this situation in the way that I do. And they think, oh, we'll just give Dr. Frank this list or give him this list. I need a certain kind of thing. And sometimes we have to iterate several loops before we finally get the data. Then once I get the data, I have to process it, I have to analyze it, and I have to prepare it for use by individuals. It's quite a bit of work. But I used to be able to keep up, but right now I'm way behind because I got so many states that are waking up all wanting data. But I'm going to be ready for Colorado. In fact, I'm going to show you guys tonight some data for Conejos County, one of the first places I'm going. Wednesday, I'll be there. I'll show you what that looks like. Well, anyway, that's enough of an introduction. It's good to be with you guys. Thanks for introducing me. As always, I could talk for hours. God made me this way. Sorry, I'm built this way. The nice thing is that when I think out loud, you can hear what I'm thinking and make me a good teacher. So I hope you can learn from me. I'm going to try to squeeze a lot in tonight. So as Christine Hall, one of my favorite people, says, she says, I need you to listen fast. But I'll do my best to slow down on the slower parts too. Now, I've spent a lot of time thinking about tonight, and I've prepared a talk. And I was looking at it a couple hours ago and kind of getting it fresh in my mind, getting organized, and I realized I have bitten off way more than I can chew. So I'm going to do my best to just get through the material, and I won't go as deeply as maybe I would have, but we can handle that in the question and answer. But basically, the idea is I'm going to give you a little history and context. You need to understand where I'm coming from, how I'm coming at it, and how it fits into the overall election integrity picture. And then I'm going to explain what's wrong with our elections. And I got to tell you, most people don't know what's wrong with our elections. They think they know what's wrong, and it's a fun exercise. I'll ask people, well, what do you think's wrong with our elections? And people say, oh, we have illegal aliens in the voter rolls. Well, yeah, that's wrong, but that's not the core problem. And they'll say, well, oh, we have these machines. We got to get rid of these machines. And I'll say, yeah, we need to get rid of the machines, but that's not the core problem. And you kind of go through this loop. So I want to talk to you about what the core problem is, and I'll get you through that. But here are a couple of the key ideas. What's wrong? There's remote access to our elections. Outside people can access our elections. There's manipulation of our voter rolls, which is the subject of tonight, and then ballot manipulation. So it's just about everything that can be wrong with our elections is wrong with our elections. And so the core problem is that we've given up our local responsibility, our local control of our elections. We need to take back local control. So the core problem isn't that we have machines, isn't that they're networked, isn't that we don't have photo ID. Those are symptoms of the problem. The core problem is we're not in control of the elections. The core solution is take back control of the elections. And then how do you get from point A to B? That's 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about that. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the voter rolls and show how they're being used. I know Vico's on vacation this night, and Vico works with Cause of America. He's the one who first invited me into this election integrity stuff almost 5 years ago now in December because of the audit in Pennsylvania. And when he invited me in, the first thing he did was send me some voter rolls. And so I have a lot of experience there. Anyway, so then I have several methods that I use for analyzing voter rolls, and I want to go over those with you guys tonight because each of the methods has a different purpose, a different function, and there are various kinds of analyses, and I want to talk to you about those and why each one is important. You know, when I meet with the sheriff, does he want to see my algorithms? No. When I meet with the sheriff, he wants to say, wait a minute, who are these people that are getting in the voter rolls that aren't citizens? He's interested in that. So there's an analysis I do for sheriffs. There's analysis I do for clerks. There's analysis I do for public events. And there's an analysis that I do that I give to people who are finding fraud in their local elections. So there's different methods, and I want to talk you through those tonight. And I won't, unless you want to be here for 3 or 4 hours, I won't be able to go in depth in each one, but I'll dig in enough that you'll understand and see enough that you'll understand what's going on with that. And then the application of those methods. Why are we doing those? It's the 7 steps. And I'll take you through that a little bit. And basically our constitutional strategy for taking back our elections. And like Amy said, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. I'm going to do my best to finish.
Or maybe during.
or yeah, I love that. Yes, please interrupt me anytime, Amy. I appreciate that. And we'll keep that going. If you want to follow what I'm doing, take a picture of this slide, maybe a screen grab. This is, I don't have a website. I post on social media. I gave up trying to have a website a few years ago because I was attacked so much that it was too much work to keep it up. So I said, forget it. And all that social media. Try to take Facebook down. Try to do that. So I use these various methods, including Vocal. That's Mike Lindell's platform, VOCL, to tell everybody what's going on. So you got that. As Amy said, I'm a scientist. I've got 60 scientific peer-reviewed publications. So as you listen to me talk, you're going to hear my scientific mind working. And you're going to see why I've done certain things and what the logic is. I think in the scientific method, I work in the scientific method. So that's what that's about. Because really, I'm a modeler. That's the best description of me. I'm a modeler. I like taking large sets of data, finding computer models, finding mathematical models, and applying those and making predictions. And you can apply them to find problems and whatnot. So my motto is follow the data with Dr. Frank. But someone said, you need to change your motto, Dr. Frank. It needs to be, I have a graph for that, because you got a graph for everything. And I wouldn't say for everything, but I do have a lot of graphs for various topics too. And I don't just like studying the surface of things. I like digging deep into the numbers. I like to get to the bottom of things. And then when you get to the bottom, you can understand. So I end up modeling elections. I end up modeling sunspots, climate, populations, vaccines. How about that? If you want to see some of that stuff, I've got a YouTube channel where I've got a lot of these talks up there, edited with Cause of America. Some of our earlier talks are up there, and you can see some of the other modeling and stuff that I've done. Here's another link. The Rumble, that's my Rumble channel too, if you want to follow me there. So if you want more detail, go to one of those places and you can see what I'm doing. Now, how did I get into this? I got into this, as I mentioned, because Vico invited me. I was asked to look at Montgomery County's voter rolls soon after the 2020 election. And they sent me the voter rolls, and I noticed something very stunning. Because it was a legislative audit, we were given back-end access to a lot of the information. And this is a whole story I don't want to spend too much time on tonight. But basically, we discovered, I was part of it, a 6-member team, that before the election in 2020, the voter rolls were inflated by about 10%. So in Montgomery County, it went from about 500,000 up to about 550,000, and it did it in 1 minute. And it was 6 weeks before the election. Then all of those people voted in the election. Then by the end of December, they'd all been removed from the voter rolls. So let me review. 6 weeks prior to the 2020 election, the voter rolls grew by 50,000. Every one of those 50,000 people voted. And then after the election, every one of those 50,000 people were removed. And we discovered that. And we're like, wait a minute, what's going on with that? And so we got copies of the logs from the state voter roll logs, showing that it was non-government organizations that were logging in to the SURE system, they call it, the acronym for their voter roll system. We're logging in and adding back into the rolls people who had formerly lived there. And then those non-government organizations, knowing that those names that they put in the rolls were not going to be real voters because they weren't going to vote. They don't live here anymore. They're dead, whatever. They would stuff ballots using those names. So the reason why you want to inflate voter rolls, the reason you want to have lots of names in the voter rolls that aren't real voters is because you can use the names. Every ballot that gets counted has to be assigned to a name. So that's basically what we discovered. We discovered it was the NGOs in the state that were doing that. And that set me on a course where I started studying all the states. I've now done all of the states. I've got voter rolls for every state in the country. I've analyzed them in great detail, most of them right down to the precinct level. And I've studied them versus a variety of parameters, and I'll discuss that with you tonight. And each one of those things reveals something. At the beginning, I had a fundamental driving question. The question was, is this just an anomaly in Montgomery County, or is it a statewide issue? And what I did is I studied the voter rolls in Montgomery County, and I discovered that once I had the voter rolls in Montgomery County, I could predict all the other counties. I didn't even need to have their voter rolls, and I could tell you how many 18-year-olds voted in every county, how many 19-year-olds voted in the county. I could tell you all these things. And in other words, I figured out the algorithm that was being used to stuff ballots in the election. Mr. Lindell discovered me and made a movie about me called Scientific Proof, a documentary where he discussed how those algorithms that I discovered. And I started in Pennsylvania. Now, in the scientific method, you ask a question. Is this just Montgomery, or is it the whole state? Well, I don't have time to analyze everything in the whole state, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a prediction. So I started predicting county after county after county after county, and after about 10 counties, and I was predicting every one of them, I realized, hey, this is real. So then what I do next, I said, well, gee, is it the same in the whole country? I don't know. So I downloaded the voter rolls from Florida and North Carolina and Ohio and Colorado, and I noticed that the same pattern was there. Now, what's interesting is in that process, I proved that each state is centrally controlled by itself. So in other words, all I have to do is study one county in Florida, and I can predict all the other Florida counties. But I can't predict the Colorado counties from that. To predict Colorado, I have to look at one county in Colorado, then I can predict all the other counties in Colorado. One county in Ohio, then I can predict all the others. So you can see my scientific methodology going there. I was trying to figure out how is this operating, and I was able to deduce, because after you do 20 states and they all work the same way, okay, so there's an algorithm, there's a central algorithm controlling our elections, and that's what Mr. Lindell talked about. Then, of course, President Trump discovered my work, and he asked me to be his keynote speaker for his first rally after he was out of office. This was in June of 2021, and he asked me, he said, Dr. Frank, I want you to explain to the world how they stole my election. So I got to get up and explain to the world on 2 huge jumbotrons and 21,000 people live, and I'm sure millions of people online and on television, how the elections were stolen. And my mindset at that time was they're manipulating the voter rolls so that they can manipulate the ballots. And it's mostly math. And so I was showing people the math. And so I thought I could save the world teaching people the math. I thought all I had to do is prove to people that the elections weren't real because they were totally predictable. And once I showed they weren't real, then that would fix the problem. And I remember Mike Lindell and I thinking, okay, 6 months from now, we got the country back. Because once people see that this isn't real, then they'll act. And so there's a scientific question and a mathematical question and an algorithmic and method analyzing the voter roll question. And then there's a what do you do about it question. And those are really 2 questions. But I got to tell you, there was a huge amount of political schooling that I needed to get. And I've gotten it. I've been on the road now almost constantly for 5 years, teaching people about this, what's going on in our elections, and learning a heck of a lot. And so tonight I can share a lot of that wisdom. They call me the Johnny Appleseed of election integrity because I'm traveling around the country, but really I'm not planting seeds as much as I'm cross-pollinating, gathering wisdom, gathering evidence, gathering experience, and then I share it with teams how to do that. An example of that is in California a few years ago, I was the LA Times sent reporters to one of my meetings, and they took pictures, did a huge spread on me, and they did a follow-up piece a week later. And I remember when this article came out, I was actually kind of offended. Meet the man trying to upend voting, starting with California. And I was actually kind of offended because this was August of 23, and I'd already been working in election integrity for almost 3 years at that point. What do you mean just getting started? I've been all over the country. But it's a point well taken. a lot of the work that we were doing, all of us were doing in those early days, were based upon a set of false assumptions. And then I want to expose those assumptions to you guys today and show you where we need to go. But we're going to talk about that. Of course, early in 2021, I met with Tina Peters as well, and you all know how that came out. We were all focused on machines in those days and thinking about the fact that the machines were networked. And I just heard that Mr. Lindell got his phone back a couple weeks ago. They seized my phone the day after they took his. So whatever's going on, I don't know. Maybe they're still investigating me. I don't know, but we'll find out. So basically tonight, I want to red pill you a little bit. I want to bring my experience together into an organized presentation showing you how you need to think about this. And most people are not thinking about it in the correct way. So I'm going to try to red pill you a little bit. If you remember this scene from The Matrix, if you take the red pill, that means that you're going to wake up and see the world the way the world really is. If you take the blue pill, you go back to La La Land and you're going to, everything's okay. But everything's not okay in America. So let's ask the fundamental question. What is wrong with our elections? And as I pointed out in the early days, we were very focused on the machines and the networks and the electronic. And my favorite saying at talks was, whoever touches the machines last wins, okay? And that's the problem with our elections. But really, that's a symptom of the problem. It's not just the machines. It's not just the electronics, so everything is connected. If you or me, if I was in control of the electronics, I could secure them. I'm an electronics expert. Most of our clerks are not experts, though. Most of our election officials don't have a clue about IT. I'm reminded of a funny story in Oregon. I was in court in Washington County, Oregon, and Mark Cook was in the witness stand at that moment. And when he took the stand, he had his phone in his hand, and he looked up at the judge, and he says, "By the way, Judge, I'm looking at your network, and your network is out of compliance with national standards. It's about 6 years out of compliance." It was a beautiful moment. But it just illustrates government officials are usually way behind the IT curve. And so if we're expecting them to secure our elections with IT, it's probably a bad idea. Anyway, so the core problem isn't the machines. That's a symptom of it. The core problem is that in every state in America, elections are now centrally controlled by the state. The machines are just part of that. The problem is they're centrally controlled. And that's why we, the people, have lost our voice. And the simple example I give to illustrate this is when I was in college, I remember they had the VAX computer, the central computer on campus, and all of the terminals that would log into it around the campus, we called them dumb terminals because they had no computing, no smarts in them. All they did was they just logged into the main computer. Well, that's the way our elections are run today. There's a state central database. There's a state central software that's running, managing the elections, and each of the clerks around the state or the election officials, they're just logging into that system. They aren't actually running their own elections at home, so to speak. I was just recently in Alabama. Great teams down there, by the way. Alabama's coming away. I'm looking forward to getting back there, working on their data, too. I was down there, and one of the clerks, she said, "Dr. Frank, I just hate our state system." And I said, "Why is that?" And they said, "Well, because every time we want to log in, we have to log into Omaha, Nebraska. And there's always bad weather out there, and it's difficult for me to work." And I'm like, Omaha, Nebraska. That sounds familiar. You all know what's in Omaha, Nebraska? Yeah, the headquarters of ES&S. So in other words, ES&S, they have about a third of the election systems in our country, are actually managing the databases for Alabama. So it's not the state central database isn't even in Alabama. So it's very remote. The point I'm making is the local person is not in control of their election. It's somewhere else. And in the case of Alabama, it's not even in their state. It's in Omaha, Nebraska. But here's the problem. The clerks and election officials, they're just dumb terminals. There's no local computing. They log into the central place. The problem is they think they are in control. They think they are managing their elections, but they're not. So part of the analyses that I do in voter rolls is when I meet with clerks is I show them their own voter rolls. And you would say, well, of course, doesn't the clerk have access to their own voter rolls? One would think. But guess what? Ask your clerk for a copy of the voter rolls sometime. You know what she'll do? She'll say, yeah, here's a link, and you download it from somewhere else. They don't work with their own list that they keep and maintain. They log into a state system that maintains it. And so I have to, one of my tasks when I meet with clerks is I show them, no, you're not in control of the rolls, and here's some examples. I just met with a clerk in Wisconsin. We met with the clerk there, and she was convinced that she was in control of the voter rolls in her county, and we had to show her that she's not. And that was an interesting situation. But anyway, so in other words, I'm not just red pilling you, I'm also red pilling the officials. Now, I think it's important that you understand something. I met with this lovely clerk. She's a patriot. She's a hardworking, honest person. It's not necessarily the clerks that are the problem. They're just doing their job. They're using software they've been given. They're following policies they've been asked to follow. So the clerks aren't bad people. They are, most of the time. There are a few bad ones. I think they need to go to jail. But most of them are, 99% of them are great people. They're just working hard, government officials. The real problem, like I said, is you're not in local control of your elections. And what does Stalin say? He says it's enough that the people know there was an election. The people who cast the votes decide nothing. The people who count the votes decide everything. So the solution is you got to be counting the votes. You got to get the election back under your control. I like what Patrick Byrne described me. It's the best description I've seen yet. He said, Dr. Frank reverse engineered the algorithms they're using to cheat our elections. That's what I did in the early days, absolutely. He went on to say, there are a dozen tools in their cheating toolbox, and they use whichever combination of tools works best in every situation. Aha. So, in other words, there are a dozen ways to cheat our election, probably more, but round numbers, there's a dozen ways. In order for you to basically stop all of those ways, you need to have local control. So, it's like you go to the doctor and the doctor says, you've got a dozen tumors and we're going to take one of them out. Well, that's not going to fix your problem. You've got 11 more to go. A lot of what I see around the country are what I call hamster wheels. People are putting all their energy into one aspect. Oh, Dr. Frank, we're cleaning the voter rolls. Oh, yeah? Which ones? Oh, yeah, we're cleaning the state voter rolls. Oh, yeah? Well, that's like what Sean Smith says. He says that's like sweeping a dirt floor. Or I say, that's like cleaning your kid's room. You're not in control of your voter rolls. You're cleaning something over there that they can make dirty in 1 second, 1 millisecond, one keyboard stroke. That's a waste of your time. That's a hamster wheel. I always tell people, remind people of what Einstein said. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I call those hamster wheels. Too many people are doing hamster wheels. I'll just give you a couple of them, and then I'm going to dive into the roles. So, for example, in the early days, we were demanding audits. That's a hamster wheel. You don't get anywhere that way until you have evidence. So you got to find evidence first. People are trying passing legislation or top-down approaches. We're trying to get lawsuits. Oh, we can fix the election if we can just get this lawsuit. Yeah, how's that going? Or just the other day I was talking to somebody, oh, Dr. Frank, we're going to fix our election because we're going to elect new officials to use the state system. So that's fixing broken elections with broken elections. That's not logical. In the early days, a lot of states, about a dozen of them, prepared large statistical analyses of their elections and turned them in, and that didn't get us anywhere, did it? So it's a lot of energy. I call them hamster wheels because it's a lot of energy, a lot of work. You're not making any forward progress. Or people say, oh, we want to do recounts, Dr. Frank. And then I always just tell people, oh, yeah, doing recount, doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the register. What matters is how many of the bills are counterfeit. Recounts are a waste of time if you're just recounting the same fraudulent ballots over and over again. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Cleaning the state voter rolls, I think, is the one that people have been spending a lot of effort on. And it's really sad to me because cleaning your voter rolls is not a productive use of your time. Cleaning the state voter rolls, cleaning your local voter rolls, keeping your own copy that you clean, that has value. So I've been teaching people that. So bottom line, to take back our country, we're going to have to get rid of the machines and perform our elections with our own 2 hands and our own 2 feet. Problem is everybody's asleep, everybody's apathetic, everybody's lazy. We've been doing this for decades, letting other people teach our children, letting other people run our elections. That's the problem we're in. We, the people, are confused, we're apathetic, we're sitting on our hands, we don't know what to do. I like what General Flynn says. He says the pain level isn't high enough yet, but we're getting there. We need to wake up, and we're getting there. As he says, the solution is local. So in 2 weeks, I'm going to be going over what this local solution is. People don't know their own true power. The solution is local, and we can change the whole country starting in your county. And if you want my help, and you want to sign up for Cause of America, we'll get you in there. Because you got to realize we're at war. This is a real war. It's as Yuri Bezmenov described it, it's a state of war, undeclared, total war against the basic principles and foundations of this system. And the difference about this war versus a shooting war is it's a fifth generation war. And in fifth generation warfare, it's all information stuff. So I'm going to talk about the strategies in 2 weeks, but I'm giving you the context because then you're going to understand my analyses here in a minute. So what I see is people say, well, we got to do something, Dr. Frank. Sure, those may be hamster wheels, but we got to do something, and I disagree. Since we're in war, we need to think like soldiers. And in the art of war, Sun Tzu says, move not unless you see an advantage. Use not your troops unless there's something to be gained. Fight not unless the position is critical. Too many people are burning out the grassroots doing things that has no positive effect. And all we're doing is wasting our resources. If you're in an army, you don't shoot your guns in the air. We need to save our ammunition. I call it the 7 steps. I'll be back to that in 2 weeks. We'll go over that together. There's no silver bullet. And if you want us to help you do it, sign up at Cause of America, or you can send me an email, drdouglasgfrank@outlook.com, and we'll get your team going. All right. So let's get into voter roll analysis. I think that's enough context. I needed you to understand the context because what I'm about to explain to you. At the very beginning, the analyses I was doing, I was looking for algorithmic manipulation. Why? Because I was proving that the elections weren't real. And so I could show, if I could look at one county and predict all the other counties, doesn't matter whether they're big, small, urban, rural, black, Chinese, green, doesn't matter. If I can predict all the other counties to like part per million accuracy, ridiculous accuracy, that shows. So that would be one type of analysis, and you guys can see those in other places. I'm not going to go over that too much tonight. Another kind of analysis is I look at population, registration, turnout versus time. I'll show you a couple of those graphs tonight and show how those come into play. We look at demographics. We look at voters by age, party, and precinct out of the voter roll analyses. I'll show you some of that tonight. We look for errors in reconciliation, especially none of the rolls reconcile, by the way, nationally. What do I mean by that? If you go to your clerk and you say, how many people voted in the last election? And the clerk says, 100 people. And you say, well, let's just look it up. You go online, click. You look online at the Secretary of State website, and it says 110. You look back at your clerk and say, hey, how come there's only 100? You say it's only 100, but the state says it's 110. It doesn't reconcile. There's huge errors in reconciliation throughout the system. We use those errors to find fraud, and I can show you ideas of that. Merged voter rolls, and I want to talk to you about that tonight. I've talked about that before, but that's one of the analyses. Each of the approaches that we use has a purpose, and it used to be all I had to do all I thought I had to do was to come into a county and show that their elections weren't real, and then I get them involved. But I've learned, nope, it takes a lot more. And I need these different analyses for different purposes in a county or in a community. Each one of them serves a purpose. So we'll talk about that. So let me just show you that our voter rolls are centrally controlled. And I think maybe one of the clearest examples is an early example from Wisconsin. I testified before their legislature in December of 2021. And I showed them this graph. It's for their 3 largest counties in Wisconsin. It starts in 2009 and goes all the way to 2021. And it's month by month how many people are in their voter rolls in the 3 largest counties, Dane, Milwaukee, and Waukesha counties. And because they're different sizes, I put them on a percent scale. That way you can see the shapes of every county. And I showed this to the legislature there, and I basically said your elections are centrally controlled. This is in individual counties making individual changes in sync. This is a central control algorithm controlling your voter rolls. And Robin Voss, who I also had a private meeting with, he's the Speaker of the House there, he said, but Dr. Frank, we would expect that because these 3 large counties have a lot of turnover in them. And I just said, well, 25% turnover after an election, you remove 25% of the people from the voter rolls. I mean, you can see right before 2012, the voter rolls surge and people vote, and then you take them out. And then right before 2014, not so much, but it happens again. And then right before 2016, the voter rolls fill right back up again. And then you remove 25%. And then by 2020, it's all full, all added right back again. I said, that's pretty severe. 25%. He goes, well, they have a lot of turnover. They're big counties. And so I just said, well, what about all your counties? What about every county in the state of Wisconsin? And when this graph went public, it was like on the cover of newspapers around the state, because people were being told in Wisconsin that the elections couldn't be fraudulent because they were locally controlled. Well, just look at that graph. That's every one of their counties. Does that look like local control to you? I don't think so. And it's every county in Wisconsin. Now, that's just Wisconsin. I can show you the same thing for Wyoming. And here I'm showing you raw numbers. This is not a percent scale. So you have small counties and big counties. And you notice they have central control of their voter rolls too. And if I normalize it, I guess I didn't normalize it. I was going to show you a normalized one, but you get the point. Let me show you another example. Here's Oregon, another state. This is the number of people in every one of their counties, 36 counties in Oregon. And you notice that their voter rolls, number of people for every 2 years in their voter rolls. And when I put it on the same scale, you'll notice that they used to be random, the number of people in their voter rolls. Suddenly, they all took off. That doesn't mean that every clerk suddenly ran back to their computer and decided, oh, yeah, we're going to start adding people to the rolls. No, that's when the state of Oregon took over central control of the rolls and basically handed it over to Eric. But the idea is that they're automatically registering. They're adding people to the voter rolls who are touching any government agencies, such as driver's licenses or human health, welfare, something like this. Any government agency, they were automatically being put into the rolls. The local clerks weren't doing that. The state was doing that. And you'll see here in a minute what I mean by that. So in other words, it's central control of the rolls. So I use these sorts of graphs and these sorts of analyses to show people that every county in a state is being manipulated. And the clerks have never even seen these graphs. They don't even realize, what? I thought I was in control of the rolls. No. And I mentioned algorithms. I just brought one example. This is Grant County. This is I'm showing by age in one county in Oregon how many people. This blue line is what their population is. So I'm showing you by age, their demographics, and then the gray curve is how many people are in their voter rolls by age. And you notice that they have more people in their voter rolls than they have people by age. The black curve is who they consider active voters, but even that is essentially 100%. And I can tell you now that a clean voter rolls has about 70% of the voting age population. And then the red curve is who voted. And you notice that it's like a perfect turnout over here. So the reason why the voter roll analysis is handy here is you can show that you have an unrealistic turnout over here. It's completely ridiculously good turnout. And also you have your rolls are way inflated. So it's a good way to show that. So yes, our voter rolls are inflated. So another kind of analysis I do to show that your voter rolls are inflated. Here's an example from Maine. I'm trying to show multiple states tonight so you can see that I'm not just showing you one state. The problem is in every state. So this is from 1988. This graph is up to present. This blue curve on top, this shows you the number of voting age people in Cumberland County, Maine. It looks like they got about 250,000 people there today. And this dashed blue curve is the population trend. And then the black curve is every 2 years, how many people were officially registered to vote in Cumberland County, Maine. And you'll notice that starting right about 2012, their voter rolls just shot right up past their population. Does that sound familiar? Because that's when it took off in Oregon too. Well, guess what? Both states use the same external company to manage their voter rolls. So in other words, that's when the state took over, and guess what? Their voter rolls are inflated. You can see that very clearly there. So that sort of graph, that sort of analysis, which I've done in every state now. By the way, you can go on my YouTube channel and see, or my Rumble channel and see a lot of those graphs and see that. But not only are they inflated, they're dirty. Because what's really happening is they're adding people faster than they're cleaning them up. And so the rolls are becoming progressively dirty. And I've given a longer description of this, but let me just kind of briefly go over this. You can go on my YouTube channel and see a longer version of this one, but I'll just give you the briefly. What I'm going to show you is voting age population. Out of the voting age population, those are people over 18 and legally allowed to vote, what percentage of them are registered, and then what percentage of those vote? I'm going to show you a graph. So it's two axes. So on this axis is percent of the voting age population that's registered, and on this axis is the voting age population who voted. And so, of course, anything over 90% to me is highly suspect, because a clean voter rolls is typically around 70%. 60 to 70% of the voting age population. So anything above 100, of course, is stupid. In other words, how can you have more people in your voter rolls than you even have people available to put in your rolls? Well, guess what? This gray area up here would be 100%, more than 100% turnout, so that can't be right. So I'm showing you these lines here are the various turnouts. This would be a 55% turnout of registered voters, for example, and this would be a 75% turnout of registered voters. You got more people registered, and yes, a certain percentage. But like I said, I think a clean voter roll should be right around here. This would be around 75%, because it's normal to have some slop in your dirty voter rolls, right? I mean, somebody moves away today, you would expect them to not be taken from the rolls yet. So there's going to be some in there, and that's normal to be a little inflated. That's healthy. So this is where I would expect it to be, and around 60% turnout of voting age people. That's a good turnout historically. I've studied that for 100 years. That's a good turnout. If you have 60% of your voting age people voting, that's really good. That's a good turnout. So if you had 75% registered of your voting age people and 60% of them voting, that would be a really good thing. Well, and the data I'm about to show you from the census and from official Secretary of State reports state by state. Well, so guess what? You got 9 states that have more people in their voter rolls than they even have people. And up here, you got Wisconsin is one of the worst in the country. Now, the way I describe this to people is, think of this as a glass of water. And over here, you have a clean glass of water. And as you move to the right, the glass of water gets dirtier and dirtier. So as the glass of water is getting dirtier and dirtier, like your voter rolls are getting dirtier and dirtier, you don't want to drink more and more of it, more and more voting, because then you're getting more and more dirt. Well, these, especially Wisconsin and Michigan and Virginia and Maine's in here too, you know those elections are dirty because you've got way too many people in the rolls and way too high of turnouts for those way too many people. And shows here's the rest of the country. You can see the rest of the whole country is, we're in trouble. The voter rolls are dirty throughout the whole country. Now, Wyoming's an exception over here to the left, and they have a really interesting policy in Wyoming. If you don't vote in an election, they take you off the rolls immediately. How about that? That's a little hyper clean, if you ask me. I think probably could be in here. And then I didn't have all my data yet for Tennessee. They're actually over in here now. So you get the point. There's a longer description. I just wanted you to see, are our voter rolls inflated? Oh, yeah. All across the country. And what that is that provides a credit line for cheating. A bunch of names in the rolls. You can stuff ballots using those names, and that's where we're going. So I think that's enough on that graph. I just wanted to show you kind of a video of the whole country at once. You can kind of see where we're at. If you want a longer version of that, you can go to my YouTube channel, and I'll talk you through more of the details. So then people say, well, gee, Dr. Frank, the voter rolls are dirty. Should we try to clean them then? I don't think so. And what do I mean by that? So let me just give you an example from Kentucky. Now, notice I'm picking different states. So here, this is from 2017 up to 2023. This is their voting age population, this blue line. And then this red curve is the number of people in their voter rolls. And you'll notice that in 2020, it was, first of all, it's growing faster than the population growth. It's inflated because they're putting in people that aren't real voters faster than they're cleaning up the people that move away and die and things. And then there was an extra surge right before 2020. So Kentucky has about 105% of its people registered. Now, I just want to tell you, Kentucky's a red state, and they have 105% of their people registered. Well, Oregon is a blue state, and they have 105% of their people registered. So I don't want you to think, and this is a red pill moment for some of you, that Republicans are the good guys and Democrats are the bad guys. The Republicans are just as corrupt as the Democrats. In fact, The Republicans have been provided more opposition to our election integrity around the country than the Democrats have. I never hear word one from the Democrats, but the Republicans fight me coming to their counties, fight me coming to their states. So the Republican Party is not necessarily our friend. All right, but anyway, just talk about this for a second because it also brings up another hamster wheel. So you notice the voter rolls are growing, and right in here in 2019, Judicial Watch noticed that and sued the state, Kentucky, and said, you're out of compliance with federal law. They won in court. And then the ACLU countersued 6 months later, and they had to put those people right back in the rolls, the same people. So they took out a bunch of people that weren't supposed to be in the rolls. The ACLU countersued, and they forced them to put them all back in again and more. So that was a lawsuit not giving us the remedy we want. Today, there are more people registered than there are even old enough to vote. It's not just one county, it's the whole state. Every county here in red has more than 100% of their people engaged. Somebody in here, I remember, Owsley's got 120% of their people registered. And so Judicial Watch has been going around the country suing county after county, state after state. Here's an example from 2023 that Judicial Watch sued Los Angeles. It was actually EIPCA, Election Integrity Project California, sued, and Judicial Watch enjoined them. And they proved that the voter rolls were dirty, and they had to remove 1.2 million people from the voter rolls. Think about that. It's about 1/3 to 1/4 of the people in the voter rolls needed to be removed. What did I just say a minute ago? It should be about 70% of voting age people. They were at about 100%. So that shows those numbers are about right. It was proven in court they had to remove them. The state agreed that they would remove them, but I was following them and tracking them, and not just me. We got good people, good Cause of America people in California were tracking that. And within weeks, the voter rolls were completely full again with new non-real people. So my point is, the problem isn't that the voter rolls are dirty. The problem is that someone else is in control of them. So in Kentucky, they took a bunch of people out, but they put the same people back in again. In Los Angeles, they took a bunch of people out, and they filled it up with new non-real voters. Who were they? It's not you and me. It's not your local clerk. It's the state or whoever the state is hiring. Now, right now, Oregon's being sued, and that lawsuit's going well. They've already admitted in court that they're out of compliance with federal law. Their voter rolls have 105% of people in the voter rolls and them not be illegal. They've also got a bunch of non-citizens in their voter rolls. So that's a big deal. So should you clean up your voter rolls? Should you clean up your state voter rolls? No. Cleaning up your state voter rolls is like cleaning your kid's room. It's just going to be dirty because you're not in control. Only way to keep the voter rolls clean is to lock them up. You got to keep your kid out of the room if you want to keep it clean. So what are we looking for in our elections? What we're looking for is we're not looking for auditing the ballots or the machines. I'm not saying you shouldn't. And there are a few instances that it's absolutely been necessary to audit the ballots and the machines. We're auditing the voters. We need to be going county by county, precinct by precinct, and looking at the voters. And Dan Schultz has been telling us this for quite some time. We need to have people in every precinct who are doing their job as precinct captains. You know, people say, why should I be a precinct captain, Dr. Frank? There's nothing to do. There is something to do. You just forgot. Your job is to keep the voter rolls clean in your precinct, your own copy clean. In the old days, we all used to have precinct books where each precinct captain was in charge of their precinct and they kept their precinct book clean. It was our job. It still is our job. Go ahead, ask the clerk who's charged for cleaning the voter rolls. They'll say the Secretary of State. Ask the Secretary of State who's in charge of cleaning the voter rolls. They'll say the county. Guess what? It's always been our job. It's always been the responsibility of the party to deliver. By the way, your parties are letting you down, aren't they? They should have been doing that. So let me talk about churn, and then I'll stop and take questions. Here's an example of the same kind of graph for Oregon, 1960 to present. You can see the blue curve is the voting age population increasing. And once again, you notice right there in 2014, their voter rolls shot up. And this is the voter roll inflation right here. They got about 1 in 3 of the people in the voter rolls, 1 in 4 statewide don't belong there. They've just been added automatically. But it's worse than that. And I want to show you that tonight. It's called churn. This blue line here is 13,000 or so in Baker County. It begins with B. It's the first one in the state, so I just give you the first example. And it's a very conservative, very excellent county. Good people there. I've met them. Their voter rolls every 2 years. You can see their voter rolls are tracking their population very nicely until this moment right here where the state took over control. On this graph, I always also include This light gray line shows you the number of people month by month that are in the voter rolls. Now, if you see that, you would just think, okay, they're just putting people into the rolls. But it's more complicated than that. Since the state has taken over, something else is happening. The rolls are growing faster than the population, yes, but something else is happening, and I want to show that to you. I'm going to show that by focusing on the last 4 years of their voter rolls, and we use 5 copies of their voter rolls. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 copies. This is the date: January of 21, January of 22, January of 23, March of 24, and January 25. So 5 copies of the voter rolls. And what I'm doing is I'm not just going to look at the total number of people in the rolls. I'm going to track every name in the rolls. And interestingly, when you do that, what you discover is that the people who are in the rolls here in January 2021 are being steadily removed. Now, this red line here looks like a line. It's not. It's got a little bit of wiggle in it. But in other words, the people are being removed at almost a perfectly steady rate. This is 4 data points here. But wait a minute, Dr. Frank, if they're being removed, how come the voter rolls are getting bigger? Answer is they're adding back people faster than they're removing them. So in other words, there's a total down here. This is the number of people who've been removed from the rolls. And then if you add that to the number of people who've been added, we call that the voter roll churn. It's about 40% of the people who are in the rolls have changed. It's churning. And so just to make a clear description of what churn is, say that a county has 100 residents and 10 move out and 10 move in. Well, that's 20 changes out of 100. So we call that a 20% churn of the voter rolls. It's a simple idea. The thing is while they're churning the voter rolls, they're also removing the people who are credited with casting a ballot. So in Baker County, 13% of the people who voted in the election, who actually voted in the election in 2020, have since been removed. 1 in 7 of the people in the rolls. And I can show that as a table. And I could go over this, but I don't think I need to tonight. I think I've done that before. The point is the rolls are churning. And I use the metaphor. It's like if you watch the old Gunsmoke episodes, when the posse is chasing the bad guy out of town, he hops off his horse, he grabs a branch, he walks his horse off the trail, and with the branch, he brushes the ground behind him to cover the trail. The churning in the voter rolls is enabling people to stuff ballots for non-real voters, and then they're taken out of the rolls afterwards automatically. Remember my Pennsylvania example. 50,000 people were added before the election. They all voted, and they were taken out afterwards. That's a very fast churn, isn't it? Most of the churn in the states is slower than that. So I've done the whole state of Oregon. You can see the median churn's about 52%. Can you imagine a county having 70% of their voter rolls change in a mere 4 years? It's ridiculous. I've done the whole state, and then the number of voters removed from the rolls, the median is about 15. Now, I just did this yesterday. This is a brand new, actually I was working on it today even. This is for Conejos County, Colorado. And you can see they've got an 18 and older population of about 6,000 people, and it's not changed much. And they've got about a 0.7% change in their population. Let's just call it flat. Their population isn't changing. But look at their voter rolls. I have 7 copies of their voter rolls, and their voter rolls have churned 65%. In other words, people have been added and removed to their county rolls. 65% of their rolls have changed in a mere 4 years. It's a tiny little county, and I'm going to be there on Wednesday, and I'm going to tell you, when I sit down with that clerk and she sees that, she's going to say, I don't believe you, Dr. Frank, that can't be right. What am I going to do? I'm going to hand her the list of all the names that have been added and hand her the list that all of them have been removed, because I'm tracking them name by name, remember? And that's going to show. And in her case, 15%, about 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 of the people who voted in the 2020 election have since been removed. And by the way, I'm seeing that all over the country. That 15%, notice that's the same as the Oregon median, 15%. Okay, it's not an accident. There are algorithms that are controlling this. That's what's happening. One more thing on the churn. Since you know that the voter rolls are being churned, not only are they inflated, but it's usually not the real voters. There's an inflation on top of that. That's what's churning, because that's where the cheating's going on. So I was in Oregon a couple months ago, and I was talking with the team, and we were looking for fraud, and the voter fraud, and the one of the team members said, Dr. Frank, we're not finding dead voters. We did what you said. We're sorting the list from oldest to youngest, and we've been looking them up, and they're all real people, and they're alive, and they're voting. And I said, well, what list are you using? And they said, we're using the most recent copy of the voter rolls. I said, no, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to use the merged copy. What's a merged copy? Merged copies, you take the most recent copy of the voter rolls, and you add back in everybody who's been deleted. So now you have a super copy. So you can imagine my voter rolls from Conejos County that currently has 5,000 people in it, about 5,000 people. Actually, the merged copy has about 7,500 in it. Okay, that's how many people have been added and removed in a mere 4 years. And now you sort that list by address, and you can track them, and you can find the fraud. So they weren't finding it in the one county I was in Oregon, but the next day I was in another county, and they were explaining, Dr. Frank, we're finding all these dead voters. They died in 2012, and then they voted in a bunch of elections since, but they were removed in 2023. So the point I'm making, and the reason I brought up the story, is if you're trying to find fraud, that's a different analysis. You've got to do the merged. If you're investigating the voter rolls, especially if you're looking for fraud, you don't just look at the most recent copy because it's been churned. You need to include the removed population as well, and that's how you're going to be able to find the fraud. So let's finish this up, and I'll take some questions. So recently, President Trump did a tweet. This is one of the longest tweets I've ever seen him do. I don't want to read the whole tweet, but he starts out by saying, I'm going to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots. And also, while we're at it, highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial voting machines, which cost 10 times more than accurate and sophisticated watermark paper. Blah, 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 blah. He goes on and on and on. I like all the stuff he said. I have nothing negative to say about it. But the one thing he said that to me is the most important thing is he said, I am going to lead a movement. That's it. Come back in 2 weeks. I'm going to teach you how to do that movement because we're not going to win with the voter roll analyses we do. We're going to win when we apply that to show that there's fraud in the elections, and we use that to build a movement. And that's why I'm going to Colorado this next 10 days. I'm working in these small counties. We're going to be building a beachhead there for addressing the whole state. And if you want to get there, like I said, you can sign up for causeofamerica.org or send me an email. And I always joke about it, but if you will build that team, I will come. If you build it, I will come. And we need to vote Amish, all paper, no machines. And that's our ultimate goal is, and I'm ready for questions. Amy?
All right. I feel like you might need a breath because I don't think you took a breath for the last
I tell you, I was made for this, man. I could talk for hours.
You did say there was a lot to go through, so you're right.
I tell people to listen fast.
Diane wants to know, Michigan's authorities will not release the voter list to the federal government. What information are they afraid of releasing? Is it our social security numbers or driver's? Oh, she says our social security numbers or driver's license numbers aren't on that list, are they?
They're not, but the federal government already has them.
That's right.
The federal government's been asking Maine as well. And Shanna Bellows, the governor of the Secretary of State there, saying, no, it's private information. I'm not going to share it. But the government already has more than she has. The reason she doesn't want to reveal it is because it will show exactly what I've been showing. It shows the churn. It shows that they have non-citizens on their rolls. And the government, federal government, knows who the citizens are. And all the federal government has to do is doge their voter rolls with their Social Security rolls. Boom. You could prove that the states have got dirty voter rolls and got non-citizens on the voter rolls. That's why they don't want to give the voter rolls.
And Tom Hall in Colorado wants to know, is the DOJ's collection of voter rolls going to help?
So that's a top-down solution. I'm not against it. Let's say, back to the war analogy, we're invading Germany, we're trying to get to Berlin, but we got to get to Normandy first. And it's awfully nice having air cover while we're invading Normandy. And I see the federal government as air cover, making it easier for us to take Normandy. But I don't like people sitting around waiting for the DOJ to do something. We have to plan, we have to strategize, we have to get into Normandy, regardless of whether we have air cover or not. The DOJ is just doing the bidding right now of President Trump. So, for example, he's putting pressure on various states, and he uses these lawsuits to pressure them into compliance with his other agenda as well. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's. I'm not looking for anything that the DOJ does to be a remedy. Think about it. What's the government going to do? Government sues them and says, "Okay, you're out of compliance." What does the state say? "Okay, we'll get into compliance." Guess what? The state's still in control of your elections. We're no further along. That was a hamster wheel. So we shouldn't be putting our hope in that or our trust in that. That's just a nice frosting on the cake. We need to be baking the cake.
Randy Eckman wants to know, how is Tina Peters?
She's been doing calls. She has a phone, and she's not very happy. I was in Washington, D.C. in February with Mr. Lindell at CPAC, and Mr. Lindell met with President Trump in the Oval Office. And when Trump discovered that Tina was in prison, he looked over at the 6 attorneys in the room with him. He pointed at him and said, "Get her out." And immediately you notice that the DOJ launched an investigation into lawfare, into her specific case in the state. And you notice that Trump has been sending tweets at him. And Trump also just moved Space Force out of Colorado to Alabama. So Trump is using the levers he has to pressure Colorado to let her out. There's talk in the wind of him declaring her or the DOJ declaring her as a federal whistleblower, because then they can take her out in custody as a federal whistleblower. She was convicted on state charges, I think falsely and inappropriately, and I think the judge and the people who prosecuted her need to go to prison. And I would say that every day that she spends in prison, they should have to spend a week in prison. That's what I think. But anyway, so I think she's not very happy. She's been up and down in her health. You know, she's an 70-year-old lady. She's no risk to society. There's no reason for her to be there. How about that for an answer?
All right. Stephanie is asking, do we need to create an initiative to get it on the ballot to have our voter rolls controlled by our cities and not the states?
So I like that question. I'm not opposed to it. But keep in mind, if you're going to create an initiative, I think she means a voter initiative, right?
It's what I thought when I read it. Yeah,
and that's one of those hamster wheels I talked about earlier. Remember, trying to fix broken elections with broken elections? It's like, oh, we're going to get rid of Newsom, so we don't like our elections, so we're going to get rid of Newsom, and so then they do a recall election. And then how did that work out, right? You're dealing with a broken election. How are you going to fix a broken election with a broken election? So there's the hamster wheels there. I'm not opposed to it. So, for example, Oregon has an initiative right now, a citizen initiative, where they're trying to get on the ballot to do election reform. It's a vote. But if you're looking for that to be the remedy, that's what I think you've got your hope in the wrong place. You can use the movement to build awareness of the problem and to build a movement from the bottom up. The solution is bottom up, local.
Dan wants to know, we actually have several people asking what you think about the Dominion sale. And Dan is specifically asking, why would Scott Leyendecker acquire Dominion, now Liberty Vote, if machines were going to be gotten rid of?
I don't know the answer to this question, but if I were to speculate, I would say, by the way, notice you see my scientific training there. When I don't know, I don't know. I tell you I don't know. But if I was to speculate, I think this is a legal strategy to protect them from liability. That's what I would say, because they're reading the tea leaves. Mm-hmm. Now, in my other talks, I've mentioned that I think we're in trouble in 2026, and if you want to know what I think really is going to happen, I think we're going to have a constitutional crisis in 2026. We can have a long discussion about that, but I think the Trump is not going to be willing to allow a midterm election to go to the other party like it did in 2018, and then they impeached him. I think he'll nullify the election in 2026, and then that'll create a constitutional crisis, and it'll all be centered on the machines and the networks and all the election fraud. So I think we're headed. So I think we're headed for a big moment in our country, and we're going to have to, and that's when the machines will be gone. That's my prediction. That can be wrong. That's a speculation.
Okay, we have a Question from, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's pronounced Day or Daya, but this person is asking, where do we get a list of the people taken off the rolls so that we can merge the two? And what dates of spread do we need to use? How do we determine if people are citizens on our list?
Oh boy, there were some good questions there. More
Mm-hmm.
than one. The first one is how do you get the list of the people who are removed? Let me go back to that table for a minute, and because I think I did go quickly, but I tried to set context and then also okay. So here's a Conejos rolls. Notice I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 copies of the rolls spaced about, this is from March of 2020 to the election in 2020. So that's a 9-month span. Then we got a 2-month span. That's interesting because right after the elections is when they usually do voter roll maintenance. And then a 1-year span, that's actually 11-month span, and then a 1-year span, and then that's about almost a year span, and then that's about almost a year span as well. So about a year span. So where do you get the list of who's removed? Well, all I have to do to see who's removed is compare this list to that list. And I can show who was removed from that list to this list. Now, that doesn't mean that I got everybody, because they could have added somebody and removed them within that interval of time. So I would have missed that one. But this 1-year increment is sufficient to show that the voter rolls are changing dramatically, way more than the local person realizes. So that's how you get the list of who is removed. Now, in California, you can request what they call the canceled list. Now, most states don't give you that, and that is the removed, but it's only the most recent one, so it doesn't give you the history like this does. So the short answer to the question is you need multiple copies of the rolls to get the list, and when I get multiple copies, I write software to help people get those lists. So that's that. Now, what was the second part of the question?
The second part was, what dates of spread do we need to use?
Okay, so I did kind of answer that. I would be content with 1 copy per year. There's a lot, for example, in my Pennsylvania example at the beginning, I mentioned that 6 weeks before the election, they inflated the rolls. Those people all voted, and then 6 weeks later, they were all removed. So I would have missed that completely if I had rolls before and after. But then what would have happened is we would have had a huge number of people who voted in the election and no record of them. And that's why the elections don't reconcile, by the way. Even here in my Conejos County example, the official number of people who voted is 4,404 in the 2020 election, but already, as of a month later, when we got these rolls, already 100 people are missing. So we don't know who voted in the election. Your own clerk doesn't know because they don't keep their own list. They're just using the state system, but the state system's already taken them out. So that's why the systems don't reconcile. What was the third part of the question?
The third part of the question was, how do we determine if people are citizens on our list?
So that's a tricky one. There's a really good story associated with this. A county in California, I'm not going to give away names, a local government contractor there had access to the Medicare Medicaid database, and they cross-referenced it with the voter rolls and discovered there were a bunch of non-citizens in the rolls. So that's one way you could find. And they brought it to a grand jury, and the grand jury dismissed it because the grand jury didn't know who to prosecute. Because the ballots that were being cast by these non-citizens, they were mostly illegal aliens, by these non-citizens, weren't being cast by them. Their name was being used. Somebody else was stuffing about using those names. So who do you prosecute? So they dropped the case. Well, that became a national story, and other people around the country have done that too. So one way to find out who the non-citizens are is to compare with another government database that says whether they're citizens or not. That would be Medicare, Medicaid. Another way is to show probable cause. If you can show probable cause that there are non-citizens in your voter rolls, you can go to your local DA and they can get a court order and get access to that list as well. So that's another way to do it. Another way is if you're an employer, you know this, if you're an employer, when you hire someone, you have to confirm that they're a citizen, and there's a federal database that you're required to submit applications to clear whether somebody's a legal citizen allowed to work, et cetera. And you could do that a few times. There's a stickler there, because if you're using that for other than the employment purposes, that's illegal. But if you're working with a sheriff or working with a DA, or you have a judge's order, you could use that as well. So I just gave you 3 ways. There's other ways. You can go knock on the door and ask Jose Rodriguez whether he's a citizen or not. And that, to me, I think is the fastest way.
All right. So we have, I don't know if you're going to know this off the top of your head, Dr. Frank, but Lex in Illinois wants to know what level of granularity, i.e. real-time, daily or less, weekly, monthly, or when requested, have you recovered in Illinois? 102 counties plus 6 city election authorities from the Illinois State Board of Elections.
I have 1 copy of Illinois' voter rolls, and it was a huge data set, and it was a mess. And I was working with a team there in Northern Illinois to get their data ready, and it just turned into a major job. I probably put a month of work in my spare time, because I'm always on the road doing stuff, a month working on that, and before I even began to make some progress in that. And that was just 1 copy of the voter rolls. So I don't have a lot of granularity for Illinois. But if somebody there wants to work with me or set up a team, we can put together and we can contact a bunch of people. We can talk to Vico, find out what he has. We might be able to combine forces and combine data sets. People say, well, gee, Dr. Frank, where'd you get the voter rolls you have? Well, by hook or by crook. We talk to the party. Sometimes the party will give them to us. Sometimes we can order them automatically from the state. Illinois might be stingy with theirs. I don't remember. But candidates in the past, like let's say you had a candidate who ran in 2020, talk to his campaign manager. They may have a copy of the voter rolls from that. So that's how you kind of have to gather them up, if that makes sense.
All right. It does make sense. So Dwight in Clackamas says, I think I can actually answer this one. How do we motivate people to become precinct captains and to start making clean voter rolls in Oregon? Come back in 2 weeks, Dwight, because Dr. Frank is going to roll out his whole binder strategy for you.
I'm going back to Oregon again soon. I've been there a lot lately because we have a big movement happening there. I got to tell you, this is worth telling this, Amy. This is so important. When I was in Oregon about October last year, I met with a sheriff, and I don't want to give names away, but it was a northern sheriff, and he was so excited when I showed him the data. He says, Dr. Frank, how come you haven't been out on the east side of the state yet? Those counties would love your information. And I just said, well, because nobody invited me. And as I answered that question to him, because nobody's invited me, it occurred to me, duh, why am I waiting for people to invite me when I know where the target county should be? So we set up a tour, and I did it about a month ago. 2 of the local people there, Teresa and Steven, set it up. And they drove me around, and we targeted all these small red counties, and it was tremendously successful. Now, why is this important? Because when I'm meeting with all these sheriffs, they're great sheriffs in the state of Oregon. They're constitutional. Out of the 32 sheriffs have already linked elbows on other constitutional issues in the state and are basically pushing back on the blue dot of Multnomah County and Washington County, right up there at the top of the state. Most of the other people think that Oregon is a blue state. It's not. It's got 36 counties. 30 of them are blue. Are red. 3 of them are blue and 3 are purple. All we got to do is get half of those red counties to get organized and work together, and we got the state back. We'll take back our elections. That's what we're doing there. So how do you get them motivated? We're preparing a war plan. How do you get to Normandy? How do you get to Berlin? You prepare a plan. Problem is too many people working by themselves, not working together. That's what we've finally got our act together in Oregon. We're acting as a state all at once, and that's how we're going to get them motivated and come back in 2 weeks. And definitely, if you're in Oregon, Dwight, did he say Clackamas? I've got a great team in Clackamas. How come he didn't come to my event? I explained all this. So, hey, Dwight, get on the list there and get on my follow me on social media, because I'm going to be back in Oregon soon here, and you can join our effort. Please join us.
All right. Terry Saul wants to know, well, Terry says, I have the list each 6 months from 2023, 2024, and then asks, should we be getting lists starting right now for 2026?
Which state?
Did not say. Terry, let us know which state.
So we at Cause of America, because of Vico's work, Vico's been working really hard. We have a lot of voter rolls. So if she's got a couple of copies, we can probably find.
I don't know if Terry is a she or a he.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's Terry. It's a name. Like
Yeah,
I mean.
exactly. Well, Terry, I hope I didn't offend you, but that's, I don't care.
Oh, Terry says Williamson County, Texas.
Oh, Texas, 254 counties. I've done every county in that state. That's a lot. You wonder what I have off the top of my head, dude. It's a lot of work. Texas has got a great Cause of America person down there, Lori Gallagher. She's awesome. She's down there in Williamson County. She's been leading a strong movement there for hand counting of ballots. So if you're not working with her, you definitely need to connect with her. If you don't know her number, sign up at Cause of America and ask, and we'll get you connected to her. But I got all excited. If he's collecting voter rolls every 6 months or so, that's sufficient, I would think. And boy, oh boy, do we have voter rolls for Texas, because we have pretty good teams there. So we should be able to fill in what else he needs. So his question was, does he need to keep getting them? I would get them, sure, every 6 months
I
is
think
fine.
the question is, does Terry need to start getting them right now for 2026?
I would definitely get a voter rolls, say, September-ish, October-ish, and then if you got one 6 month right before the primary, that would be very valuable. And then say after the primary. So it's nice to straddle the elections, because a lot of stuff happens during the elections. People get registered right before an election, and you want to catch that upswing, and you want to see who's getting put in. And then people get cleaned up after the election, because they do what they call state voter roll maintenance, where they remove people who have missed multiple elections, and they're required by law to take them off after a certain amount of time. So I think that was a wishy-washy answer, but I think if you had rolls around September, around March, twice a year, that'd be pretty good. If he has to pay for them, then you don't want to get them every day. But a lot of states, they're free. Just go online and click, like in Ohio. I have people here that have been downloading them every week since 2020 election, because they're free. Just go online and click, and they download to you. So it depends on the situation.
Okay. Okay, Michael in Oregon says, hello, Dr. Frank and Cause of America team. Thank you for your dedication to this work in our nation. My question is about voting in states with mail-in voting. I'm in Oregon, and there is a varying opinion on when to send your ballot. Could you touch on the pros and cons on both and why you prefer one over the other?
Great. So they're trying to get rid of vote by mail in the state. Oregon started vote by mail in 1998, and they've never had a conservative legislature since. And they're
fairly coincidental, I'm sure.
Fairly coincidental, and if you think about it, they mail a ballot to everybody, right? If you have voter rolls that are like 105% of your people registered, then remember my 70% number? That means about 1 in 3 people in your voter rolls don't belong there. And you're mailing ballots to all those people, you're basically littering the pavement with ballots. How hard is it to pick up those ballots and turn them in? There's no chain of custody. It's crazy. So the mail-in ballots is a dumb idea. I've got a quote here. I can find the slide where Hillary agrees. Jimmy Carter agrees. Anybody who's ever studied elections agrees. The worst kind of election is a mail-in election. You should not have mail-in. Now, I'm not against mailed ballots. For example, if you're in the military and you need to mail your ballot in, or you have a legitimate excuse, you can do an absentee ballot. I'm not opposed to that, but it needs to be a small percentage, like 1%, because the clerks need to be able to do due diligence on every one of those ballots. Oh, gee, you're going to be out of town, John Smith? All right, I'm going to mail you a ballot. And I call you a couple days. Did you get the ballot? Okay, great. Don't forget to turn it in before you leave. If you want, you can put it in my hand before you go. But otherwise, drop it in the mail. You can drop it in the mail, and in other words, you can do chain of custody. You can make sure every ballot. I was in a small county in Nebraska, and the clerk there, she did that. She had something like 20 mailed ballots, and she tracked every one of them at every stage. She even signed the ballots that she mailed out so that she knew, she initialed them so that she knew when they came back that they were from her. But we said to her, hey, did you know that there are about 20 more ballots that you guys counted that came in by mail and they weren't sent out by you? And she said, what? That can't happen. She ran in her office and she brought out her notepad where she had written down every ballot that she had mailed out. And we showed her the list of the other mailed ballots that she'd received, and she had not sent the ballot to them. Somebody else had sent them a ballot that they turned in. So that's the problem with mail-in ballots. You've lost tons of cheating capability. So that's my opposition to mailing ballots. Now, if you are in a mail-in state, which you are, which is Oregon, when should you turn it in? If I lived there, I would receive my ballot in the mail. I'd do my homework and fill it out. I would go in and I would turn it into the clerk in person. And when I turned it in, I'd say, I want you to verify that my ballot has not been used already. A lot of people say, oh, gee, Dr. Frank, I mailed my ballot back and I went online on my app and I said, oh, gee, I'm tracking my ballot. Anybody who believes that, we got some beachfront property in Iowa to sell you. I mean, that is dumb. In the world of electronics, that if you trust that, that's crazy. Now, think about it. You drop a ballot in the mail. How do you even know that it's your ballot that they're counting on the other end? You don't. They don't. There's no way to verify that. So for you to think that that's a secure system is crazy. We could go on for hours with all the stories around the country that we've discovered with mail-in ballots. So I would turn it in by hand, and I would make sure that they checked that my name hadn't already been used. And what you're going to find if you do that is a lot of people are going to go in and their name's going to have been used already. A ballot's already been cast using their name. And so if you just dropped it in the mail, you wouldn't have known. You wouldn't have even known. You would have gone online. Oh, my ballot was received. No, it wasn't. Your actual real ballot was rejected. Somebody else's ballot was counted using your name.
That's right. All right, we got two more
and the
questions.
later the better. Closer to the election, the better, timing-wise. Yeah, because you don't want to give away information about the election to the people that are monitoring it.
Agreed. Okay. Two more questions, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap. And this first one is a follow-up question from Lex in Illinois, who says, what statewide or county trends in delta number of voters have you identified within turn time around election day, plus or minus total mail-in period?
Let's take that slow. Start at the beginning again.
Okay. I'm guessing Lex is a data person here. So what statewide, or what he's got is what statewide / county trends in, and then he's got a delta number of voters have you identified within turn time around, quote, election day, plus or minus total mail-in period?
Okay, so what happens is that question depends on the state. But let me give you an example.
Okay.
In Alabama, I was in a little county there, Coffee County. 98% of the people there voted in person on election day. The delta right before the election is small. Now, in the graph I showed with Kentucky, remember, you notice right before the election, it surged right there. That's not unusual because people want to get registered. They've moved into an area and they want to get onto the rolls. Now, a number that would be a useful number to compare would be, on average, nationally, 9% of people move per year, but 2/3 of those stay in their own county. So we would expect a 3% surge before an election. If it's 2 years since the next major election, you might expect a 6% surge right before an election. And those could be real people that have just moved in. But you're not going to expect to see 60% change like we had over here in Conejos, a 60% churn and in a mere 4 years. That's way too high, especially when the population hasn't changed much. So it's churning. So I think that's what he's asking. What churn? Now, then after an election, how much does it come down depends on the state. So, for example, in the Kentucky example that I just gave you, after the election, it stayed high because they did very little voter roll maintenance. Some of the states are aggressive with voter roll maintenance, like Wyoming. You didn't vote, bam, you're out. So there's a sharp drop, but that's the state taking people out. But other states like Oregon, they ho-hum, they just let it go on. So it changes state to state. Now, I think that's the general answer to his specific question. The specific answer to his specific question about Illinois, I couldn't answer.
Okay, that's fair.
Unless I go look and see if I actually, you know what? I'm certain I did. I put graphs up for Illinois too. I've done there.
There is a graph for that.
Good comeback, Amy. I've done population and election graphs for Illinois, so we could go look at that. Hey, go check out my Rumble channel or my YouTube channel, and I bet you I've got Illinois graphs up there, and you'll be able to see the changes that you're asking about.
Nice. Okay, so this is our last question for tonight, Dr. Frank, and this comes from Nicholas St. John in Nevada, but I'm betting he's not the only one with this question. And it's speculative, but we'd love to hear your opinion. He says, do you think that President Trump will issue an executive order for federal elections for paper ballots only, one-day voting, hand count?
I don't think he's going to do that. I've been watching the president, and he knows, like even when he gives an executive order within his executive authority, the courts come out against him, don't they? I don't think he ever wants to give an executive order that he knows the courts can legitimately overturn. There's always going to be some crappy judge somewhere that's going to put a stop on whatever he orders. But you notice that when they make it to the Supreme Court upholds his executive orders. If he were to do an executive order specifying that level of detail, I'm not sure it would make it to the Supreme Court because the Constitution is explicit that states run their own elections. What's making the whole thing murky is that in 1993, the federal government passed NVRA, National Voter Registration Act, which said, we, the federal government, will give states money if they will start to keep central data voter rolls so that we can compare state to state and we can clean our voter rolls. That was the intent of it. So states have been taking money, all right, for that. And then HAVA happened, Help America Vote Act 2002, after the Hanging Chad fiasco. The federal government said, we all want you to switch to electronic voting machines. And the states said, no, it's too expensive and they're insecure and we don't want to do it. And the federal government said, oh, don't worry about it. We'll set up secure federal networks, CISA, which Trump just got rid of. We'll set up secure federal networks for that, and we'll give you money to buy the machines. And so the states have been taking the money. So I could go into more, but I think that sets up the stage for what I'm about to say. So in other words, the federal government is putting money into the states, but that money comes with strings. Oh, you're going to take the NVRA money? Then you have to comply with how we want you to maintain your voter rolls. So that's what the Judicial Watch lawsuit against Oregon is all about. Oh, you're going to take HAVA money? Oh, that means you must use machines in this way. So what's happened is, constitutionally, states have sole authority. But the feds have got their fingers in the pot because they were given the money and the states are agreeing. So there's this gray, murky entanglement in the middle. So strategically, I've noticed Trump is very strategic. He's not flippant. He sounds flippant sometimes, but no, he works with his lawyers, and his lawyers beat it up before he does stuff. I know that. So what's going to happen is, I don't think he's going to run out and say that, Because if he says that, it's just going to end up in court and it's going to end up in that quagmire and be inefficient. What did Trump say? What did he actually say? He said, I am going to lead a movement. Ding, ding, ding. Why is he saying that? Because he knows even if he casts an executive order, as you said, I'm speculating, but if he casts an executive order, the states that won't want to comply will simply take him to court, and they'll tie it up for years anyway. And in the end, you don't win with a lawsuit anyway. Politicians don't start parades, they join them. We have to start the parade. If Trump's going to lead a movement, where's the movement he's going to lead? Let's get that movement going. That has been my day-to-day focus now for a couple of years. We're building a movement, and I'm happy to have him step up as the general of that movement, and we'll follow him to Berlin. But in the meantime, we got to get to Normandy. So is he going to cast an executive order? I don't think so. I think that would be ineffective, and he doesn't want a splotch on his record. He doesn't want it to be overturned in court legitimately. So I think something else is going to happen. I think it's his 83rd executive order during his first term. You can look it up. He had several hundred executive orders, but he had two, I think, were there in 2018 that were election related. His 75th one and his 83rd one. The 75th one established a committee to look into election fraud in the election, and that was worthless. But the 83rd executive order is interesting. The 83rd executive order gives the president, the executive, authority to nullify a federal election if you can show that there's foreign interference in it. And if you noticed over the last couple of months, remember, I think it was in June, Kash Patel released the fact that there were 1 million fake ballots and 1 million fake driver's licenses made in China that were seized by the FBI in October of 2020, before the 2020 election. No, you never heard about it, did you? It was seized by them and kept in stow. Now it's being brought out. So I think what's actually going to happen is month by month, we're going to have revelations from all the federal investigations that were taking place around the 2020 election. People forget that Trump was the president in 2020, so he ordered the Justice Department to do investigations around the country. We have got tons of evidence. I think a lot of that evidence is going to start coming to light, and they show foreign interference in our elections. So as that's coming to light, then we're going to have an election in 2020, and I've run the numbers. I'm a modeler. And it looks like he's going to lose the midterms. So the House is going to go Democratic. What's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to want to impeach him, just like they did in 2018. So what do I think is going to happen? I think he's not going to give the executive order. He's going to lead a movement. And he's going to release all this evidence showing that there's problems in our elections. Then the election's going to happen. If it goes our way, he's just going to say, okay, went our way, great, we're moving on. But if it goes against us, which is what I'm predicting, then he's going to nullify it. He has executive authority to. By the way, that 83rd executive order he gave in 2018, I think it was renewed by Biden. It was one of the first executive orders that Biden renewed from Trump's administration. And Trump's renewed it again in this administration. So you see where I'm going with this? I think it would be bad strategy for him to have an executive order, because I think that will just tie it up in court and he may lose that battle. And that's not good strategy. Instead, I think the better strategy would be for him to raise public awareness, which he's doing with his tweets, and then because he has executive authority. And when the election goes south, which I think it's going to, he can just say, I'm going to nullify it. Here's the evidence. And that creates a constitutional crisis. And then guess what? Then we have the National Guard run the next election, all on paper hand count by the National Guard. Boom, there you go. That's what I really think is going to happen. So there you go. That's my speculation, and I can be wrong on that one.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. Well, we are going on almost 2 hours here, so I definitely want to thank everyone for joining us, and I especially want to thank Dr. Frank for coming tonight to talk to us about inflated voter rolls. I'm definitely looking forward to part 2. And remember, that is going to be 2 weeks from tonight on Monday, October 27th. Dr. Frank is going to present his binder strategy, what you can actually do in your state, your county, your precinct, the whole 9 yards. So
that isn't a hamster wheel.
That isn't a hamster wheel. Yes. If you were guessing hamster wheel, no, you got that wrong. That's not the answer. So thank you so much for being so generous with your time, Dr. Frank, and for sharing this information with us. And we're definitely looking forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks.